educators. Here, you'll find a range of helpful resources to support your practice, as well as opportunities to help your career grow, whether you're an English language teacher or a teacher educator. Let's take a look. Join thousands of other teachers in our community to share tips and anecdotes. Watch informative videos and webinars. Participate in live panels and Q&As and learn from other community members. Read our magazine articles and listen to our podcasts where teachers around the world share their expertise. Find us on our social media platforms to connect with the teaching community and build your professional network. With our continuing professional development frameworks, you can reflect on your teaching and work out exactly what you need. Get inspiration, support, and practical ideas for your professional development and to enhance your career. Join us on your learning journey today.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the British Council ASEAN Teaching English Online Conference 2025. It's great to see so many people who've joined. Really looking forward to today's session, where we're going to be taking part in a workshop called Trauma-Informed English Language Teaching. We have our presenter here, Angcho Pyo. I'm thrilled to be introducing him shortly to talk to you all. It's a really important subject, and I'm really myself looking forward to the session. So a few housekeeping rules before we get started. So we want to make sure this is a really safe place for everyone. So of course, please be polite and respectful. Don't share any personal information or any contact details or any links to commercial products in the chat box, please. Of course, we will be removing anyone who is disrupting the session, but of course, we're going to be recorded and that's not going to apply. The session is being recorded and live streamed on the Teaching English Asia Facebook page. So by attending, you're acknowledging that your comments and names may be recorded. Please use the chat for comments and the Q&A questions that you have that we'll be asking at the end of the presentation. Just to let you know, your microphones and camera are disabled for the session. In terms of getting a certificate at the end, I hear these are really popular, and that's great. So you can online apply for an editable PDF certification. That's for all participants, and there'll be a link given at the end of the webinar. Everyone who's attended by Zoom, and you'll be able to access that and download your own copy. If you have any safeguarding concern to raise at any point, then please do send that to the link safeguarding@britishcouncil.org email address. Okay, I'll firstly introduce myself. So my name is Helen Sykes, and I'm the director of the British Council here in Myanmar. And I'm joining today from Yangon in the British Council Teaching Centre. It's absolutely brilliant to be here. I'm introducing our speaker, Angcho Pyo. And like I said, I really cannot wait for the session. I think it's just such an important topic. So he will be presenting on trauma-informed English language teaching. So he's going to be talking to us about why classrooms should be trauma-informed, particularly in the context of the pandemic, conflict and natural disasters. So he'll be talking to us about the negative impact of trauma on learning. And hopefully from his sessions, you're going to be really getting to grips with and understanding how we support students with trauma and discover practical ways to integrate trauma-informed practices into the English language teaching classroom. So there'll be example activities, of course, included. So Ko Ang is an ELT consultant and educator. He's been working as an English language teacher for more than 15 years. He published a mini bilingual dictionary from Tuttle Publishing in 2020, and he's worked as a lecturer at the University of Yangon and as a senior teacher trainer in the Sire Foundation. Currently, he's working as a freelance teacher educator and delivering training, webinars, and workshops for English teachers. Ko Ang holds an MA degree in English as a foreign language, so MA EFL, and another MA degree in TESOL. His professional interests include English language teaching and teacher education of English teachers. So without further ado, I'll hand over you to Ko Ang. Really looking forward to today's session. Everyone, please don't forget to type your questions in the chat for our Q&A afterwards. Thanks, Ko Ang.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for your wonderful introduction, right? Before I go to my presentation, I would like to ask my teachers, fellow teachers from ASEAN and around the world. So I would like to ask you the questions, how you're feeling right now. How are you? How are you feeling right now? So can you please share your feelings in the chat box? Okay. So thank you. So I'm also very excited to address the teachers from ASEAN and around the world, right? So that is to have a chance to talk about this very relevant and very important topic, right? So that's why. So I'm so excited, super excited, right? So that is, and I also feeling a bit nervous. So because I'm from Myanmar, right? So that is because I'm a little bit worried about my internet connection and a little bit worried about my electricity situation. So yeah. So let me share my slide. Can you see my PowerPoint slide now? I hope you can see my PowerPoint slide with the title. Yeah. So okay, so this is so my title is trauma-informed English language teaching. So this is okay. So I would like to ask, start with a question. So have you ever taught a student who have experienced violence, abuse, or neglect at home, or maybe in their environment, or maybe someone who has been experiencing in the life? So who has been experiencing violence, abuse, and neglect in their life? So what would be your answer? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. So another question is have you ever taught a student, have you ever encountered a student who may have lost someone they love unexpectedly? So all of a sudden, maybe because of natural disaster or a conflict or an accident, because of an accident. So okay, so a lot of yeses, right? So that is. So, and another question is have you ever taught a student who may have lived or maybe living in an environment that breached their sense of security, stability, and bond, the bonding, right? So that is, so maybe sometimes we cannot know, right? So that is, sometimes we cannot be sure. So whether they may have experienced that or not, we're not sure. We don't know our students 100%, right? So that's why. So we can only make a guess. We can sometimes. Okay. So these experiences are called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, right? So they are called potentially traumatic events as well, right? So why potentially? Why? So that means not all of them become, traumas. So they are traumatic experience, but they are potentially traumatic experience, right? So that's why all the time when there are traumas, that means they are caused by some kind of potentially traumatic events, right? So if there is a trauma, there is an event, right? There is an event. But we cannot be sure that like when there is an event, there is a trauma, right? So some of the people who with a very strong resilience may not be affected by some of the devastating event. So that's why. So not all the traumatic events may be translated to traumas, right? So that's why that is something that we should know, right? So not all the dangerous and not all the frightening experiences like will become traumas. So that is okay. So and then like we need to know what is trauma, right? So there are so many different definitions, and my favorite ones is this one. Like this is unresolved reactions. So what is trauma? Traumas are unresolved reactions to those events, traumatic events. So we have natural reactions, natural responses to those frightening, dangerous events. But like if you we release some kind of like stress hormones, adrenaline, some other kind of hormones to fight back or to flee from that event, right? So to flee away from the danger, right? So that's our natural responses. But the thing is like these energies are not used up, and then they stay inside our body, right? So that's why it is also called frozen energy that is trapped inside your body. So it becomes your trauma, right? So we use that trauma energy in other places, right? So in another place that we are not supposed to use. So that became our sort of like re-experiencing the trauma, right? So there's once you have some kind of like car accident or something like that, so you are sort of like on a alert mode, and then right, so when you see when you hear a loud noise, you suddenly re-experience that experience, right? Re-experience that trauma again, right? So that is because of the trauma energy or frozen energy that is trapped inside our body. Okay, so like the question is, why do we have to care about like traumas? So we are English teachers. Do we need to be trauma informed? We are not psychiatrists. We are not psychotherapists. Why do we need to be trauma informed? Like, so I want you to answer, like to share your opinions in the chat box. So why do we need to be trauma informed? Like, so do we really need to? Okay, so that we will not trigger it. Yeah. Mindfulness. Really. Okay, so that's really great answers in the chat box, right? So my answers actually sort of have the similar answers to your answer, right? So that is the thing is like for the this might be the most important reason here, because most of the time we do not have psychotherapists and psychiatrists and counselors in our areas, right? So maybe in the areas that is like experiencing wars and natural disasters, they may not have the privilege of like having the counselors and psychiatrists, right? So that's why. So teachers are most of the times viewed as regarded as the first line of defense. We are there like to provide psychological first aid, right? So that is, so when students re-experience the traumas. So most of the time we spend a lot of time with our students, right? So that is, we know our students so well, right? So even their parents might not have that much time to spend with their children, right? But we have a lot of time to spend with our students. So we can help, like we can be helpful, right? So although we are not psychiatrists, we are not psychotherapists. So another reason is that language classes are helpful in like building a some kind of potential space to give psychosocial support. So to the students who may have experienced traumas. Right? So that is, so they can be, language learning can be beneficial in many ways. And then British Council has already, study in Africa and, UK. So they have studied the refugees and some internally displaced person. And then, so language learning is so beneficial for building their resilience and hope. So, and positive identity. So that's why, so we teachers, English teachers, in particular, need to know about traumas, and then we should be trauma informed, right? So another reason that is not written here might be, so it works, like, because it works for me, right? So that is, so to understand your own traumas, right? That is really important for as a person, right? So there is, like, if you do not understand or like are not aware of your traumatic responses, so you might like you might harm somebody, or you might be so angry unnecessarily in the classroom, right? So that's why maybe that is the first step that we need to do, right? So to understand ourselves. Okay. So this is actually like quoted from British Council, right? So that is, so the study Language for Resilience, right? So this, like, so you can download it like on the British Council website. So what are the impacts of traumas, right? What are the negative impacts of trauma on language learning? So of course, right? So there are so many negative impacts that most of all, it sort of like have, so students who have traumatic experience may take longer time to acquire a second language. Maybe there are so many reasons that, like, so maybe because of their memory is impaired, or like maybe because they don't want to take risks anymore, right? So that is, there are so many underlying reasons, right? But so the study found out that they may take longer time than the other learners, right? So, and another thing is, like, it has a negative impact on the motivation, right? Motivation is the very important factor in learning a language, right? So that's why, so if your motivation is not there, right, it will be really difficult to acquire a language, right? So that's why. Okay. So these are the impacts of traumas on language learning. So what can we do, right? If you cannot, like, if you do not know about traumas, and if you're not trauma informed, so you will have difficulties teaching these students, right? Teaching the students. So I think there are studies in Southeast Asia as well, right? So in Singapore and Vietnam, right? So there are, like, so teachers, students with ASES, right? So I mean, like, adverse childhood experiences. So I have seen it on the internet, right? So that is even like maybe up to like 75% of students have that kind of like ASES in their lives, right? So that is, so you can like go and look it up like on the internet, right? So that is, so what we can do is, like, the first step of being trauma informed is changing the question. So you have to change so when a student misbehaves, or when the student is not following your instruction, or when the student is cannot catch up with your lessons, so your questions mostly is like, our natural response is like, what's wrong with this kid, right? So what's wrong with the student? So actually we should change it into, what have they experienced? What have this child has experienced in their life? So, right? So by changing that way, we can say that, so not, maybe we should like separate the behaviors with the person, right? So that is, so they may have that kind of behavior that, they are not bad behaviors do not define people, right? So the behaviors do not define students. So we should like shift the focus, right? So to the experience that they have had, right? So to the background. And then seeing them as broken, I really hate the word broken. Like, so when we are talking about traumatized kids, traumatized children, right? So there were even books, right? So writing like teaching broken kids or something like that. So I really hate that kind of title, right? That word is very demeaning, right? So I like the word disconnected, right? So they are disconnected from themselves, sometimes from themselves. So they from their emotions, they are disconnected, right? So from their social circle, from the war, from the classroom, they are disconnected. They have lost their connection to their maybe sometimes spiritual belief, right? So they have lost the connection. So that is what happened to these kids. So they are not broken, they just has lost a connection. So they have just lost a connection. So it is not a disease, right? It is trauma. Trauma is not a disease. It is just dis-ease, discomfort. So not struggling to some sort of struggling to cope with their emotions. That's it, right? So it is not some kind of like deficiency or some kind of disease, right? So we should change our attitude first. So this is the first step of being trauma informed. That's how I believe, right? So that is okay. So so let's go to our classroom, right? So this is like, so in the classroom, how can we help our students, right? So here are some tips, some practical ideas that you can use in your English language teaching, how you can incorporate some of these strategies, right? So there's some of these tips. Okay, so the first one is like create a safe space. So make your space both physically, make your classroom both physically and emotionally safe for the learners. So what we do is like before setting a lesson, before setting a class, right? So we assign a corner, a calming corner. So where they can go whenever they want, like so to calm down themselves, or like so when they want to have some kind of brain break, right? So so they can go there. They can go there and be be themselves, right? Okay, so this is really important for some of the people with traumatic experiences. Okay, so some of we don't know what will trigger them, right? So sometimes like some of the common words like family can even trigger them to re-experience the trauma, right? So that's why it is really good to have a space like, and then we to show that you care, right? So that is really important. So another thing is like make time for emotions. So give time for emotions in your class. So most of the time we teachers have so many things line up, right? So we want to teach this and that, everything in 1 hour of our like teaching time. So we have so many things that your lesson is packed, right? So there are no space for emotions or any feelings, anything like that, right? So that is most of the time, right? But we should sometimes to give the emotions a space for the emotions, right? So what we should do is just emotion check-in, just like I did like in the the beginning of the webinar, right? So that is I check how you're feeling, and then I share my feelings, right? That is so by doing that, like you are given an example. Right? So given an example of modeling, right, for your students. So it is a safe space. This classroom is a safe space for you to be yourself, to express your emotions. Right. So expressing emotion doesn't have to be telling, right? So that is like sometimes it can be drawing, sometimes it can be through songs, right? So that is sometimes it can be through ads, paintings, right? So sometimes it can be through body movements, right? So make time for emotions. So this is really important. So why? Reasons, right? Safety is an important step in healing, right? That is trauma healing. So this is really important. I think you all are familiar with the you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So that is, in Maslow hierarchy of needs, safety is one of the human needs, right? So if safety is not there, we will not get to the self-actualization. So the most the highest stage, right? So that is, so that's why safety is one of the fundamental needs, right? So that we human crave, right? So that's why. So this is really important. This. Okay. So another important thing that we should do is be predictable. So the thing is, our language teachers like are so creative, and then we want to give them surprises, right? So we want to surprise our students, right? So maybe hold your horses, right? So hold your horses. So maybe we shouldn't do that like too often, right? So be predictable, because use routines and rhythmic chants, right? So that is, so when you start like how would you grade, how would you start a class? So it should be similar, right? So for every day, so maybe you're using different activities for every day. So then, so students might be, it might increase their anxiety, right? So there is a term called foreign language anxiety, right? So that is, so when you're learning a language, right, you have some kind of anxiety. So that's why it is really important to start with routines and to end with routines, right? So that is, so there should be, so you should start with the same way, and then you should start you should end in the same way, right? So this is really important. So and reasons, so because some traumatized brains, right? So there is, so they may perceive, right? So they may view new things as threats, right? So that is, because their fight or flight brain is active, right? Whatever like unexpected is like, unexpectedness is not something cool, right, for them, right? So it can be something frightening for them, right? So that's why, so it is really important to use routines to be predictable, right? And another thing is, young learners tend to function well with a structured environment, you know? So they enjoy repetitions and they enjoy routines, right? So if they like Tom and Jerry, they watch it like on repeat, right? So again and again. So for them is like, if they like a Pate song, right? They watch it again and again, and then they sing along, right? So that's why. So it is really important for the young learners, and then so students with traumatic past. So your lessons should be predictable, right? So that is. So. And another thing is, these tips are really equally important, I guess, right? So this is also really important to integrate mindfulness or mind regulation practices into your lessons, right? So maybe teach them how to regulate, right? So regulate means to become back to the normal speed, normal happy, right? So that is, so that's why, so it is important to regulate the breath, right? So this is a very easy way to maybe the most tangible thing that we can regulate, right? So that is, so by doing some kind of breathe in, breathe out, or like maybe counting one to 10, right? Or maybe imagining calm places, right? So that is, so you can co-regulate with them, right? Sometimes, so co-regulate with them, right? So you breathe in, you breathe out, so together, right? So this is really important. So these are also called grounding activities, right? So this is like, so most of the time when they re-experience the traumas, they are not here anymore. They are not in the present anymore. They are back in that time, that place. So they are disconnected from the presence. So it is our sort of like, it is our duty, right? It is our responsibility to bring them back to the reality. So to remind them that they are not experiencing that experience anymore, right? So they are here and now, right? So that is our job, right? So that's why, so grounding technique means they are back in the present, right? So that's by noticing their body, by noticing their breath, they realize that their brain realize that, okay, so we're not back in that moment. We are here and now, right? So that is so very important practice when they go back to that traumatic experience. So that is another thing is by doing that, you sort of calm the fight or flight brain, right? That is so maybe you might be familiar with the 3 layers of brain, right? So that is, so we have fight or flight brain, and then the brain that is responsible for memory, and another brain is the layer of brain is like responsible for reasoning, right? So that is, so if your fight or flight brain is super active, you cannot remember, you cannot reason, you cannot socialize, you cannot analyze, right? So if your fight or flight brain is so active, other areas of brain might not work, right? So that is, so it is very difficult to learn new things, very difficult to analyze, very difficult to take risks, right? So risk taking is important part of like learning language, right? So that is, so you are always testing your language, right? So that's why, so it is very difficult for them, right? So maybe we're sort of like lowering their affective theta, right? So that is the word that used by Stephen Krashen, right? So that is like we're lowering the affective theta by regulating their mind and body, right? So that is, so regulation can calm the fight and flight brain. So that is really important to do that, like maybe like at the start of every lessons, right? So that might be very helpful. Another thing is like you don't have to sit and then you don't have to breathe all the time, right? So that is other movements can also be very helpful in reducing, shaking off that trauma energy, right? So trapped inside the body, right? So use TPR to the physical response activities, head, shoulder, knees, and toes, right? So whatever, like, so maybe if you're happy and if you're happy and you know it, you clap, right? So that is something like that. I forgot the song, right? So that is like, so total physical response can be really helpful there, right? So rhythmically moving can also give them some kind of regulation. So that's why it is important to include movements in your lessons, right? So according to Bessa Bendicock, right? So who is a Dutch scholar who published the book The Body Keeps the Score, right? He's a doctor in the PhD in trauma healing or something like that, right? So that is, so he say that he found out that in the study he found out that body-based method can be very effective in healing, right? So sometimes we cannot ask them to talk about their traumas, right? So it can be sometimes counterproductive, right? So that is, so what we can do is like using the exercise, using the body movements to bring them back to the normal stuff, right? That is, so to shake off all the traumatic energies, right? So that is to release all the traumatic energies and bring the like relaxation response from the body, right? So that leads to another tip, right? So that is avoid re-traumatization, right? So we tend to, I've worked with so many teachers who are working now in IDP places, and then so they told me that like, so once they ask their students to draw and talk about their experience, right? And then like one of the kids, like one of the children started to cry, and then everyone in the class started to cry, right? This is like, so there is a tip, I think, from the British Council as well, right? So don't open someone if you don't know how to close them again, right? So this is really important, right? So we're not psychotherapists, like, so please know your limits, right? So we're not psychotherapists, we're not psychiatrists, we're not trained counselors, right? So please, it's really important to know your limits. So don't play, being experts here, right? So we're helpful, we can be helpful, and we can be effective in helping them, healing traumas, but so it is really important to please tread lightly, please tread softly, right? So, so that is really important, right? So don't open it later. So another thing is like in English language, we tend to personalize everything, right? So the English language teaching, we tend to personalize everything. When we have some kind of like language, we ask them to talk about themselves, to talk about their family, to talk about their past experiences, right? So to talk about their childhood, right? So that's what we do. That's our English teachers do. So if you ask them to talk about it, like, so to talk about these things, maybe it might trigger them, right? So it might trigger their traumas inside them, right? So trauma energy. So that's why it is really important to give the learner choices. So maybe if they don't want to share about their family, so it is really important then to give them choices, like to talk about maybe a family from, maybe about David Beckham's family, or maybe a made-up family, right? So that is to talk about a family that is not their family, right? So give them choices, right? Or maybe a family of bears, right? So that is Goldilocks family, it's a bear family, something like that, right? So that is give them choices. So that is, it is really important to give them some kind of ways to avoid from their facing their trauma, right? So that is okay. So right, do not force personalization. So sometimes we tend to do that, right? A lot, right? Because it works with other students, right? It works with other students. So maybe, so be careful with personalization when you are teaching students with traumas. Okay, so yeah, so that's, I have already talked about it, right? So that is, so we do not know, right? So it is like, so it is crossing, it is like crossing the minefields. Like we will not know like when we will step onto when, right? So that's why, so be careful with your choices of topics, and at the same time give them choices, right? And let them know, like, even if they feel uncontrollable, even if they feel overwhelmed, right? So they have a chance to like excuse from the lessons to go to the camming corner, right? So that is, so I have, and then the camming corner that I have like presented in the first tip. Right? Another thing is positive relationship like plays a very important role in healing trauma, fighting traumas. So Peter A. Levine, right? So who is the author of Waking the Tiger, I guess, right? So Waking the Tiger, Healing Trauma, something like that. So Peter A. Levine sort of encountered an accident, right? So he was, so he almost had some kind of like car crash or something like that. And then, so he's sat on the pavement, and then there was someone with him, right? So that person asked him like, what should I do for you, right? So then he asked him just to stay and then hold my hands, right? So by doing that, like one day, some kind of like the ambulance arrived, all his body functions are like working normally. So his heart rate is working normally, so beating normally, and then he is not having any kind of traumatic response to this. So he highlighted in his talk, he highlighted the presence of so positive social relationship. So that is really important in fighting the traumatic experience or the traumas. So really, even if we are encountering a frightening experience, having somebody who is calm and positive is really important. So we can be that positive and calm presence in our students' life. It's really important. So include activities that call for collaboration. So actually there is a course on teaching English, right? So I think teaching refugees and displaced learners, that is the title, I guess, right? So in that course, right? So you can there is a activity that they suggest, right? So this is a digital class activity, so where you read out, and then students trying to write down whatever they remember, and then they collaborate and then work together to build up the text, right? So that is one of the very good activity to to connect them back with their friends, right? So that is because they are disconnected from their social circle as well, right? So that's why it is important to connect them back with their friends and other people, right? That's why. Okay. So yeah, so to reconnect with other, right? Positive relationship is really important for psychosocial well-being, right? So it is really important. So I think in the book written by Besaventikov, right? So during the war, right? Some of these children live in a very safe place, but without their friend, without their family. And then some of the some of the children live in a not very safe place, right? A very dangerous zone with their family, right? When they compare it, like children who live in the danger zone with their family are not traumatized, are not easily traumatized, right? So because of the social presence, because of their family presence, right? So they are not traumatized. That's why it is really, positive relationships is really important in fighting the, the coming traumatic experience, or like past traumatic experience. Okay. So another thing is the resilience, right? So these are all interconnected, right? So include activities that promote self-awareness, understanding themselves, because they are disconnected from themselves as well, right? So that's why. So trying to include some, maybe sometimes they may even hate themselves, right? That's why, because of that traumatic experience, they hate themselves. They hate their body sometimes. So that's why it is really important to reconnect themselves with themselves, right? So that is really important. So teaching them like the abilities that they can do, right? So abilities like something that they can do, even when you're teaching motorbus can, right? So you can do that, right? So there is like talk about what they can do and what they can do, maybe strengths and weaknesses, or maybe when you're teaching like New Year resolutions or something like that, right? So you can talking about their goals and talking about they want to do tomorrow. Even tomorrow is very difficult for them. Like, so to think about traumatized people, it is really difficult for them to think about future imaginary situations. So it is really important to teach them how to think about future, how to think about hope and determination. So right, so that is like, so it is really important. Sometimes traumas come with their identity, right? So maybe they hate their identity. So that's why it is really important to reconnect with their roots. Right? That's why, with their language, with their roots, right? Okay, so this is actually the last tip, right? So this is tips 1 to 5 is more about mitigating the traumatic effects, right? So the effects of the traumatic experience, the past experience. So number 6 and 7 is more about helping them to gain the post-traumatic growth, right? So that is to grow and become better person, better people in their lives. So to have social relationship, good social relationship, to be resilience. So, and resilience can work as insurance for the future storms, for the we don't know what we will come across in our lives, right? It is, everything is unstable, even for teachers, right? So AI is coming for us. So many, uncertainty and instability. So if you do not have resilience, right, so it is really difficult to face the future, right? So that's why it is really important to build the resilience in our students, in ourselves as well, right? So okay, so last but not the least, right? So this is maybe you may have heard of like kintsugi, which is a practice of Japanese people, like so the Japanese way of, I think there are some like participants, like attendees, so who are from Japan as well, right? So the Japanese way of repairing broken pottery, so with coal and silver, making it even more valuable, making the broken pot even more valuable at the end, right? But as a result, so this is what it likes, what post-traumatic growth PTG looks like, sounds like. Right? So it is like kintsugi. So please, trying to bring or build post-traumatic growth in our students' life. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you everyone for giving me your ears. Right, so I will give the floor back to Helen. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. I'm sorry, I apologize if at the start you weren't able to. Thank you. That was incredible. It was a really useful talk. We had so many positive reactions, so much going on in the chat. Obviously, I think you spoke to a lot of people who, I think, as we saw from the beginning, lots of people are working with those who've been in potentially traumatic situations. And I don't think it's often talked about actually in the world of foreign language teaching, just how we can, as teachers, really support those in our classrooms. Often we are on the first line, as you say. So really, really inspiring. We all need to make sure that we recognize trauma in our students and that we provide a safe space and are trauma informed. And there were some really great examples about using routine, treading really carefully. I like what you were talking about, encouraging positive relationships, building resilience, collaborative classrooms, all really important stuff. And I know a lot of it we're doing anyway in our classrooms, but it's just to be really mindful all the time, isn't it? We don't know, as you said, what experiences everyone has had, and making sure we're really inclusive and really trauma aware. So thank you. We've had a lot of really interesting questions coming through, and I'm going to read some of those out and hope that you're able to talk to us a little bit more and answer some of those questions. Let me find some of the questions. So we have a question on Zoom. This is a teacher who's talking about some of the really difficult traumas that she knows her students have gone through, such as losing very close relatives, or and the question is, how do you make the balance? So someone in your class has gone through really severe emotional pain, but how do you strike a balance in your classroom and make sure that it's inclusive for everybody, those who perhaps haven't been through those situations?
Yeah, so trauma-informed teaching is also inclusive teaching. So if your classroom is not inclusive, like maybe you might be re-traumatizing some students in a way, right? That's why. So if you're trying to be more and more inclusive, so it is sort of in a way, you're helping your students already, right? So that is, so you don't have to be very, knowledgeable in traumas or something like that. So that's why, and it is also really very important, like to show that you care, and then like to show that like you maybe to be kind, right? So that is one of the most important thing, right? So that is in teaching your students, right? So that is, so sometimes it is really helpful to involve everyone in your class, right? So that they understand, right? So that is, so there is a once like in my in one of my mentees, so a class, right? So that was a students like who do not like somebody approaching them, right? So that is like whenever there is somebody approaching that child, so that child is like holding a blade in his hand, and then like so till it bleeds, right? So that is so only the teacher find out after so many incidents, right? So that is so it is because so he was sort of like maybe because of the spankings at home, right? So that is because of the caning and spankings at home, right? So whenever somebody approached him, right, so he thought that somebody was going to attack him, right? So that's why. So it is really important to let everyone know, right? Every student know that. So when you are approaching these students, like you should not carry a ruler or some sharp object or something like that, right? It is okay to approach him, but if you approach it with go near him with some kind of sharp object or a rod in your hand, then he would think that it is somebody is going to attack him, right? So that's why. So it is really important to let everyone know as well, right? So sometimes like when you're dealing with some traumatized students, right? So that's why. So first thing is, if you are inclusive, you're already trauma informed, right? So and be kind, right? So to show your kindness, and it is really actually it is not just for your students and not just for your traumatized kids. It is for everyone, right? So that's why. So you don't have to do it, especially if you are the positive social presence in their life. It is helping them, right? It is helping them in a way, right? And another thing is like sometimes it is helpful to get everyone on board, right? Even the school principal, everyone, right? So that's why it is really important to get everyone on board.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question. This is from Adi on Zoom. And I think Adi makes a really, really important point, which is trauma-informed teaching is also about teacher well-being, and what strategies can teachers use to maintain their own emotional resilience while supporting students who may have experienced trauma.
Yeah, so that is a very, very good point. And then, yeah, so the most of the time, like when you're teaching them, you know, social emotional capacities, we have to demonstrate, right? So that is so one way of like one good way, one effective way is demonstrating your social emotional capacity, right? So that is like, so that's why it is really important about your teachers' well-being is really important, right? We tend to view teachers as sort of like robots, right? So that who can do everything, who can do, you know, so many things without breaking down or something like that, right? So even if we have some kind of problems in our lives, right, we do not show it, and then right, so you are not supposed to show it, right? You are not supposed to show your emotions and stuff like that, right? So it is really important to care about ourselves as well, right? So there is also another thing called, you know, compassion fatigue. When you're teaching your students with traumatized experience, traumatic experience, maybe you might have that kind of like secondary trauma, right? So that is from listening to them, from, you know, from when you're teaching, like, so hearing about their past experiences, maybe you might have that kind of effects as well, right? So that's why it is really important to practice you yourself should practice mind regulation techniques. One thing that I really like is called like very, very simple yet very effective one is bell technique. This is like BEL, bell technique. This is what I usually do before, you know, setting some kind of session, right, to calm my nerves down or something like that. Bell technique means first thing is you breathe, B, right? So breathe, and then maybe when you know your breath, like, so you go to your body, explore, explore your body. So how your body is experiencing temperature, you know, the floor that you're sitting on, or the wind, right? So that is like, so explore your body. When you know about your body, you can start listening. So the sounds that are coming from a different direction, right? So listen to them, right? So, and then you can slowly open your eyes and then name everything. So the last step is look, right? So that is, so breathe, explore, listen, and look, right? So that is, so when you look, you can name things that you can see there, right? So sometimes you can do it out loud, right? So that is like, by doing that, you're grounding yourself to the presence. So what does it mean by mindfulness? Mindfulness means your mind is full in your body, right? So most of the time we do not know how our body is, you know, functioning. We do not know, our mind is not here. Our mind is out there, right? So it is most of the time our mind is not in the present, right? Mindfulness means your mind is full in your body. Right? So that is, put your mind back into your body. By doing that, you know that you're in the present, and then you're less worried about your future and the past, right? That's why. So that is one way of doing, you know, practicing mind regulation, mindfulness technique. I think I got it, that technique, from Mindfulness Playbook. Right? So that is the name of the book, right? So you can look for it. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a really good strategy. And it's really just important, I think, to look after ourselves, isn't it, as educators, for sure. We've got another good question coming in from Zoom, which is about, I suppose, recognition of trauma. So what are the sort of hidden symptoms that are out there, the behaviours that we might see that would lead us as educators to understand that we do have someone in our classrooms who's experienced trauma? So not the obvious symptoms, but perhaps some hidden ones.
Yeah, traumas, like, it's a Greek word, right? So we all, maybe you might be familiar with that. Trauma is a Greek word. It means wound. So it is not physical wound, but, you know, mental wound, right? So sometimes it is invisible. Most of the time it is invisible from our eyes, right? So that's why it is really difficult to observe it, right? So that is maybe, as I have already explained in the presentation, that, so one thing is like they are disconnected, right? That is one thing that we can observe. They withdraw from life. So that is because they once you, according to the proverb, right? So once bitten, twice shy, right? So because of that traumatic experience, they don't trust. Maybe if it is some kind of like complex trauma as a result of their, you know, home the domestic abuse or something like that, they have a trust issue, right? So they don't trust anyone. They don't trust their friends anymore. So that's why they stay away from other people. So maybe they don't like physical touch, right? So that is, so be careful with, you know, like the physical touch. Sometimes you know them by approaching them. They don't like, you know, somebody invading their personal space, just like the example that I have already told you in the previous answer. And another thing is, one thing that you can know is like they have some kind of, we cannot conclude that by seeing that symptom, that you cannot conclude that he is traumatized, right? So, but you have to be careful, right? So as I have already told you, like in the tip 6, right? So you shouldn't like play experts, right? So that is, so, but one of the things that we can know is like if it is a child, so sometimes they fall back to their previous stages of development. So the thing is like they might be sucking their thumb.
Yeah.
Right? They might be sucking their thumb, or wetting at night, right? Wetting their beds at night. So some kind of falling back to their, you know, bad behavior, the behaviors that they have when they were young, right? So that is one of the symptoms. And then they might have some kind of repetitive actions, something that they do, not very normally, right? So maybe using maybe if they have had some kind of accident, maybe they might be playing with some of the toy cars and then hitting it with the wall again and again, right? So something like that, or maybe hitting themselves, right? So that is one way of like hitting themselves. Or there are so many symptoms that we can know, like if we are usually observant, right? If you're really sensitive, that we can all be sure that, if you see one symptom, and then you can all be sure that, oh, this child is traumatized. You can all like easily conclude that, right? So that is one thing that we should be careful, right? So yeah, so these are the symptoms, and these are the behaviors, usually from the behaviors that we can know.
Thanks. So we've talked a lot about sort of strategies around that are sort of perhaps wouldn't make students aware necessarily that we are trauma-informed educators, but just are creating inclusive classrooms. And I wonder, from one of these questions that's come in from Ariba Rice, which is actually how do we help students to learn themselves if they feel unsafe or have been through harm? So how do we actually bring this into, I suppose, a more of a conversation with our learners to help them identify how they're feeling?
One thing is to raise the self-awareness. That is one of the, so that is the most important thing to do. And then teaching them how to cope with their emotions. So one thing that they usually do is like showing the body parts, and then say the outline of the body, and then asking them to identify the part of the body that they have that kind of like tension or like feelings like heat, like so when they are experiencing that trauma, or maybe asking them to observe their own triggers, right? So if they have like, maybe when I smell this thing, I have re-experienced this, right? So that is like by asking them, maybe actively helping them to identify their own triggers, it is easier for them to avoid those re-experiencing episodes, right? And another thing is like giving them strategies to cope with their mind regulation techniques again, right? So that is, or maybe some kind of soft, squishy balls. So something that they can squeeze when they are coping with some kind of emotional, like when they feel something is becoming overwhelming for them, right? So they can just squeeze it, right? So that is like by squeezing it, like they're sort of like feeling that their body and mind is here, right? So that is, so reminding that they are in the present, right? So that is one way, right? So that is cope. Maybe sometimes even like, so when they are feeling, maybe they can cover their head, and then it is called becoming the turtle in the shell. So turtle are safe in the shell. So by using that analogy, right? So that is, so we have to cover our heads, and then just focus on our bodies, like how we are feeling right now. And then this is like, so asking them to put them into we are in the shell, we are safe, right? Things like that, right? So by reminding that they are in the shell, and then they are safe, and then so by doing that, they feel practicing this activity in the class, and then they can use it, like, so when they're facing the real traumatic experience, right? So that is,
Thank you. I like the body part exercise. I think that's a really good one. We're running out of time, so I think we've just got time for one more question. So I'd like to come to one from Melody Rose Zetimrep. And the question is, how can lessons or activities be adjusted for children who are easily overwhelmed or anxious? So how do we adjust our classrooms?
Yeah, so it is like, so using routines. So that is one thing that we should do, right? So that is, so setting the same and the same. Maybe if it is the same all the time, it might be a little bit boring for other students as well, right? So we need to strike the balance. So, and another thing is having the maybe differentiation in you know, using differentiation. So this is like so one methods of inclusive techniques, right? So there is like differentiation by differentiating your lessons inputs. So you can do that, right? So there is like, so maybe giving them one input and then giving another input for the other students, or maybe giving them choices. So maybe if you just decide for them, that it might not be a good idea, right? So that is, so maybe giving them choices. Maybe if you have 20 questions, ask them to answer as much as you could, as many questions as you can finish. So there is no pressure for them to finish up to 20. So if they can finish up to 10, it is also okay. So this is one way of giving them choices. That is, so we can, maybe it might be a little bit, you have to be pre-plan. You have to pre-plan your lessons, right? So how I am going to differentiate for the learners. So that's, you should think about it. And then giving them brain breaks, right? So brain break, because their brain might be, you know, overloaded with new information. So sometimes like give them brain breaks. Maybe that using movement, right? So there's, so to give them some kind of break from cognitive overload. Right? That is, these are the strategies that you can use when you want to reorganize your lessons.
Thank you. That was really, really a brilliant session. We've got some really great feedback coming in. I think people have really sort of touched them in that. I think everyone's experienced having someone in their class that they know is struggling and often not known really how to go about approaching it. So there's some really useful strategies, classroom activities for everyone there. And I think the key thing is, like you say, kindness and being mindful just about all the learners we have in our classrooms and being ready, just having thought about what we might do, you know, to be able to adapt our lessons, you know, to include everyone. So a huge thank you, Koang. I myself have learned a lot. Yeah, it's been a really great session. And I think now I'm going to show you how you get your certificate. There's been a few questions in the chat about that. So there's a QR code here on the presentation. So if you click through to that, then a PDF will open and you can follow the instructions which are here on the screen. Perhaps take a photo of this now so that you can get your personalized certificate. Please do take time to send us feedback on the session. We appreciate all your feedback. And yeah, it's been a great session. The conference isn't yet over. It's so wonderful to see so many people taking part. Our next session is at 5:30 till 6 o'clock. It's a teaching showcase, so really hoping that people will be joining. And Koang, as we are both together in Yangon, I really hope to meet you soon and to see, to talk a little bit more about this really interesting topic. So thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you in the next session.